Jay Hansen here, Chair of the Mechanical Board, calling the board to meeting on September 11th, 2009 at 9:31. Debbie, can you call the order?
Yes, sir. Chair Jay Hansen,
Here.
Vice Chair Eric Banning,
Here.
Walter Cattle,
Here.
Joe Fraser,
Here.
Zori Hill,
Here.
Chris Miller,
Here.
Linda Kennedy is excused. Judge Sherman may or may not be connected. Teleconference, probably during the middle of the meeting, but right now I'm having him be excused. And our new member, Ted Zook.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Has everybody reviewed the agenda, and do you have any changes to the agenda that you would like to see? Anyone? Okay. I rule the agenda in order, and business approved. Now, approval of the board minutes. Has anybody reviewed that? I actually did read those. Good to me. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes that they would like to bring up? Sir. Okay, hearing none, I rule that the minutes of the September 11th,
2018. That should be September 12th.
Yeah, September 12th, 2018.
yeah, September 12th, 2018, are approved. Yeah, that did not look right. Our next meeting date will be December 4th, 2019, in just a few months.
No one signed up for public comment.
Nobody has signed up for public comments. Does anybody in the audience have anything they would like to say or offer to the board? Do we have any written testimony? Debbie? Did any written testimony come in?
No.
Okay. Okay, so I believe that we are moving on to reports. And Mark, do you have something that you would like to share with us?
Yes, thank you. Chair Hansen, for the record, Mark Heizer with Division, giving a program update. First off, would like to thank the chair for canceling or actually moving the last scheduled board meeting to allow for a construction industry energy board meeting, just where they were considering statewide alternate method 19-01. Really appreciated that because we needed a room badly, and it was important. We have a new policy analyst for the board, Sabra Pirifoy. She's unable to be here today, and Shannon Flowers is going to be our policy analyst for today. Little note about upcoming work on the 2020 Oregon residential specialty codes. For the residential code, we're going to be looking at the mechanical changes that are in our coming up in our 2019 code, pieces that will help influence some of the changes to the mechanical and gas sections of the residential code, and see how we can maybe work on the success of the mechanical board. Again, looking for more methods to really improve it, make it easier to use. So, also, at this point, also one other new piece is meeting face-to-face our new member, Ted Zook, and just wondered if he'd like to go through his background again. I think we got that the last time, but give him a chance to more or less say hi to everyone and just make sure we put a face to a name this time around.
Well, welcome everybody, or thank you for welcoming me so well. Sorry I couldn't make the very first meeting. I had family coming in from all over the country, and when I got appointed to the board, I did not realize that the first date that we would actually meet would be that date. And now it's taken till now till I'm actually up here, but I'm glad to meet everybody in person. My name's Ted Zook. I am a building official for Jackson County. I'm also president of the Oregon Building Officials Association, active in a lot of committees there. I'm active in Region 2 of ICC. So that's been building official for 15 years. Before that, construction, same background as most building officials. You go out, your body gets beat up. You say, what am I doing this for? And you look at the guy with the clipboard. And that's how I ended up, I went back to school and became building official. I've been doing it for 15 years now. So.
Excellent. Thanks for joining our board. We look forward to the interaction with you. Appreciate it, Ted. Okay, Mark, do you have a matrix for us to
Yes, I do.
over?
So as part of the communications and I guess we're moving on to, thank you, Chair Hansen, moving on to part 4 for the communications and looking at the 2019 code. First, I want to let everyone know that it is at the printers. You can pre-order your copy of the 2019 code. The great work I'm sure you've done will be out there and available. Should be shipping soon, we think. As always, got everything done early, but you just never know what's going to happen through the publisher. And should be available online as well for the free, ready-to-read version on the ICC website. So look for it coming soon. Again, the effective date is going to be October 1st with the usual 90-day grace period, so that really everything submitted for permit on or after January 1st will be solely under the 2019 mechanical code, but you do have that ability to use the current one if you'd like. Again, I'd like to, from the division, thank everybody for the work that went into the code. Really this year, normally we might have a code change class that we require the building officials to go to. It really didn't have enough changes to really justify having people sit through 3 to 4 hours worth. There's a lot of minor changes, some that are helpful and easy to understand, and you're going to find in your packet on the back is sort of a description of the changes. There's 10 pages, and would like to, since we have some new members as well here, and just sort of give a review of some of the big things that happened. I'd like to follow along that are of note or interest to most of the construction community and our people. So starting on page 1 of 10, chapter 3, the requirements for guards. There's normally, if your equipment is within, the service side is within 10 feet of a roof edge or a drop off, you're required to put up guardrails. They now have an exception that allows you to use fall arresting restraint system. So that can help some of the designers and people are telling you, can you move your equipment so I don't have to put up a guardrail around all of this? The other part, access 306.1, it was one of the more, I guess, slightly more significant changes in that they changed the language from just appliances to also include equipment such as control devices. So if you've got something hidden, you may have to have a slightly bigger access panel for some of the pieces in the field. There was a little work on ductless mini systems and the requirement for traps on those. One thing that we may be looking at for the ORSC is for some of the simplified installations. These units come with sort of a prepackaged refrigerant line and drain. Is this Jed?
Good morning, it's Jed Sherman.
Okay, thank you. We're currently in the communications part, looking at the packet where we're looking at the descriptions of the 2019 mechanical code changes.
Thank you. I apologize, I'm a few minutes late.
No problem. Welcome. Trying to find some way for some of these packages when a mini split maybe is on an outside wall and has, just a really short run. Currently, there's some potential conflicts on what would be used for these, small drains coming from those, and we're going to look into possibly some options for that. Next one I would probably point to is on page 2. Is at the very top of page 2, part 403.3. Model code brought in some what I would call ASHRAE 62.2 language for low-rise R2, R3, and R4. This is a ventilation rate that's a little different than typical for dwelling units, But this is also, just wanted to point out, if the dwelling unit doesn't meet the natural ventilation part, so via the structural code, if they can still meet the operable windows, they don't have to do all of this. This is when there is mechanical ventilation for small apartments in more or less low-rise occupancies. There was a nice cleanup on the language for ventilation in parking garages for when you have low speed and high speed on those and have a control system. This makes the language a little easier to understand, especially when you're dealing with requirements that are in the energy code. If you have a bigger parking garage, you may have to do carbon monoxide and nitrogen dioxide sensors. So moving on to Chapter 5, a little bit clearer language in the IMC for the use of residential recirculating range hoods. The language is a little clearer. It is allowed in apartments currently under the residential code. All 1 and 2 family dwelling units have to have a 150 CFM range hood that goes to the exterior. When you're in the commercial code, you still have the ability to do continuous exhaust from the kitchen area and have a recirculating range hood. So that's, the language was cleared up a little bit there. Moving down to 504.8.2, second from the bottom, about duct installation for clothes dryers. This is one of those, yeah, you really should do this pieces of code where you have to make sure that your cavity for your dryer duct actually fits it, that you don't hammer it to fit, paint to match on the ductwork. So enclosed dryer duct does need to have enough wall area for the 4-inch duct. One clarifying section in 505.5 has to do common exhaust for domestic kitchen exhaust in multi-story buildings. People are familiar with subducted exhaust systems. The kitchen exhaust does need to go into a metal riser duct. So in the past, people might just put the subduct into a sheetrock shaft and leave it like that. So it does have to go into a metal duct. And the way the current language reads, subducted kitchen exhaust does need to be separate from the bathroom exhaust. So that's a bit of a shock for some designers that we've seen in the past. Moving on to page 3, really moving down to 506.3.13.2. Just had to hit something with at least 4 numbers on it. This gives a little bit more clarification about there are some type 1 grease hoods that can exhaust sidewall. Gives some clarity about where it can terminate and where it shouldn't, so we don't get into arguments over, when the customer, is really stuck at having to go to the sidewall. It clears up on that. And then the next 2 items really have to do with when you are doing sometimes horizontal work and you have shafts. Some locations and in some locations, people are putting pollution control units. They're actually cleaning the type 1 grease exhaust. And, there's a lot of maintenance that happens on those. It says, some people will put the pollution control unit inside a room. It's noting that that's sort of part of that rated shaft to get outside the building. So make sure they can build a rated room there and then clean the grease exhaust and then continue outside the building. One of our few cost impacts from the 2019 is exhaust fan mounting. Just clarifying, we know that on the Type 1 hoods, Type 1 fans on the roof, they have to have that hinged opening. They clarified in the code that, yes, you do need to have a restraint on there to keep people from just flopping it over and bashing it into the roof, so a restraint when you open the grease hood fan on the roof. Moving on to page 4. Really going to the second one, 507.1.1, about operation, about exhaust fan systems and the interlocks. This was just a cleanup, so this is going to be easier for the building official to understand and for you to do in the field. Wasn't actually a change, but one of those nice cleanups that we're glad to see get into the code. Under 507.2.6, clearances for Type 1 hoods. They finally got in, Type 1 hoods, when you install them, need that 18-inch clearance in all directions. If you were building it yourself, they're clarifying that when you get the UL 710 rating on a Type 1 hood, they also can give, as part of the testing, how far it has to be to combustible materials. So some of them have clearances of under 18 inches. Some of them have 0 clearances on them. So no more confusion about, well, which direction and what, when you're installing a Type 1 hood, how far do you need to be from combustible? So if it's listed to be 1 inch or 0 inches, you can now do it. So more clarifying language, but it's going to make it easier for people who are designing and installing Type 1 hoods. We'll move down to 507.3 about Type 1 hoods. The language is really the same.
Type 2 hoods.
Yeah, Type 2 hoods, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah. The current language starts out with one sentence about how to do Type 2 hoods, and it also has an exception built into what is essentially a giant ramble-on sentence. So an exception and the requirement are all in the same one. We've taken it and broken it apart, that cooking items that are allowed to be under a Type 2 hood, there's an exception for when it's not releasing grease or smoke and it doesn't have products of combustion underneath it, to make it a little easier to understand. It's just not a change in code, but just making it easier to understand. Another piece that's for the design community, the next item, 508.1.2, it does require that on the plans, you do show an air balance for a commercial kitchen. So there's always a question of how much is being exhausted out, how much is coming from your makeup air unit, how much is being transferred. They need to show that so that you can see that really it will operate properly. I think I'm going to move on to page 5 now. The second item, this is about dust collectors in woodworking areas. Oregon, it changed some of the languages and now is really pointing to NFPA 654 and 664 in the electrical code. They'd been trying to keep that they had tried to move some of that language into the code. Model code just moved that to a reference to the NFPA standards. We have had an amendment, an Oregon amendment about smaller systems, and we just rewrote it a little bit to clarify that when you have a small dust collector, that the exception applies to when you have a single collector that goes to 5 individual pieces of equipment. It might have read like 5 dust collectors going to 1 piece of equipment. We're clarifying what the intent of that was, is that one doesn't require some of the additional explosion protections for smaller wood dust collection operations. Moving further down, there's a lot of, in Chapter 6, there's a lot of language about, that's clarifying really what's been in the past about what items and flammability and smoke production for what goes into plenums. I think this is going to help both the building official and installers to realize, yes, what we've been doing is okay. There's a new section, 603.5.2, acknowledging that there's something called phenolic ducts now, and they have their own standard. This is sort of a foam, whereas we've had fiberglass hard duct in the past that's sort of foil and, you are making them. There's now actually a foam type board with foil on it. Just sort of acknowledging that material in the code. Duct sealing, there was a little bit of a change about testing for underground ducts. We'll move on to page 6, going down to Chapter 7. The one item about dampered openings, a little more clarification that if you do have dampered openings for combustion air, that it does need to be interlocked to automatically open when some mechanical rooms will have them, and just making sure that you can get combustion air in, and if it's not opening, that you don't let the piece of equipment fire. Some of these other pieces, just nice clarification. So I'm moving down to Chapter 11 on refrigeration rates and the ventilation. The code's been clarified a little bit more. They talk about, they've in the past talked about the ventilation rate for Refrigeration rooms, it's a really high amount. It's clarifying that that amount of ventilation is only when the refrigeration alarm goes off. You aren't moving 30 air changes per hour 24/7 in a refrigeration room. That's going to, just good clarifying language. Moving to page 7, on refrigerant piping, better clarification of where we don't run refrigerant piping. If you're in any part of the egress exit path, once you get in that, exit enclosure and on your way out, there shouldn't be refrigerant piping in those. Or in an elevator shaft or something else like that. There are certain limitations. Please find another place to run your refrigerant piping in. The next, we'd go down to fuel gas, Appendix C, 303.3. A bit of a change. In the past, it was never allowed to have a gas-fired clothes dryer in a toilet or a bathroom. It's now allowed if there's a permanent opening. It just shouldn't open into another bedroom. There's a limitation on where it goes to, so it should go to more an open living or common space, not to another bedroom or other room that may also have exhaust in it. I'm going to move to the bottom of that page, 7, to C403.4.2. Schedule 10, steel piping is now an accepted method for running natural gas, so there's some proprietary names for the compression fitting on that pipe. You can do it in Schedule 10. I'll point out one thing, moving over to page, and we'll move on to page 8. It's the third item down. One thing our committee noted was that piping, when gas piping is being run through framing, and it has the potential to have a screw or bolt go into it, there's a requirement to have a strike plate to protect that pipe. There's an exception for, in the model code, for steel pipe that's exempted, But since we now have Schedule 10 pipe allowed, it's for Schedule 40 and thicker pipe, doesn't require a strike plate. So if you do run the Schedule 10 through wood framing or somewhere where it could be hit with a nail or a screw and isn't protected, that would require a strike plate. So the code committee saw that might be something that needs to be protected. The next big piece is really at the bottom of the page. This is something that the building officials and everybody wanted to, I guess, get some clarification on, and that's the actual gauge used for testing pressure for, when you're doing your pressure test on your natural gas systems. Saw a wide variety of gauges. Some of them, when you're doing a 60-pound test, they were getting a 60-pound gauge, and you didn't know whether it moved or not, or they just started out pegged. So to clarify, if you're doing low-pressure systems, you can use either a 15 psi or 30 psi gauge so that you can see the movement for that pressure test. And then if you're above that, for higher 2-pound and 5-pound systems, you use a 100 psi gauge, because I believe it's a 60-pound pressure test on that. So the building official would come out, tap it, see it, do a little bleed, make sure the thing's moving. And so, and that LP lines can be tested per the NFPA standard for LP. Moving on to page 9. In the past, we've seen some confusion out in the field about gas shutoff valves behind movable appliances. It's making it clear that, if it's a cooking appliance that can be moved or a dryer, you don't have to have a remote accessible shutoff valve. If the appliance is movable, you can do like most homes have the natural gas, the shutoff for the dryer can be located behind the dryer. Second item on page 9 for C409.7, for tubing, shutoff valves for tubing systems, so your CSST model code did say that, they wanted that you do need to be able to rigidly attach the valve because you can be able to turn it without having the pipe move. They did do an Oregon exception. Again, the committee saw that there are some locations that there are some gas fireplaces where you may have a floating shutoff valve inside some of these decorative fireplaces, and if it's done per the manufacturer's installation instructions, that's one area where you can do that. Medium pressure regulators, came in, believe it or not, in the residential code as well. If you do have a medium pressure regulator that's installed with rigid pipe, you need to have a union on at least one side of the regulator because that is a maintainable piece that allows you to pull it out without it having to cut and re-thread pipe. Moving down to C411 1.1 about commercial cooking appliances. Again, some of these are really big, have really big gas loads to them. It's noting that, yes, you can, if you can move it out, you can use, the shutoff valve that's behind it. However, if they are on casters, they want to see a restraining device attached to some of these bigger cooking appliances. In other words, if it's on wheels, something to make sure it doesn't roll too far out into the kitchen on its own. So, next item that really is something of real importance would be really clarification at the very last item on page 9 about C503.6.10.3 about category 2, 3, and 4 appliances. There are a lot of different materials that can be used to vent some of these condensing appliances, and each manufacturer has done their listing to certain materials. So in venting of these appliances, really the materials are what's accepted in the manufacturer's installation instructions to avoid any conflicts of, well, now they're doing, polybutylene, or I'm trying to remember the latest material. It wasn't in the code for a while, but it's in their MII, so now it makes sure that, we can keep going as new materials come out and it's part of their listings. Moving on to page 10 of 10. Everybody still excited about this? Okay.
Yes.
Woo! All right. As we near the end of our review of the great work that was done by the committee, venting system termination location. Again, this is really more some additional clarification of language, getting it a little easier to read. It added some additional language about those category 4 appliances, especially where some of these might drip, and their locations and how they meet with manufacturers' installation instructions. It's not a cost impact, it's not a major change, it's just giving you some extra clarification on how to install it better. And again, we'll do the last one as well, C623.2, which is about cooking appliances. In a dwelling unit, you aren't supposed to have a commercial cooking appliance, please, unless it's also cross-listed for both in commercial and residential applications, some of these really mega big stoves. If a homeowner in their dwelling unit wants to put in a commercial deep fat fryer, they'll need to do it per the commercial code. You just can't put it underneath a residential range hood at that point. And with that, if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to take any. But once again, thanks to everyone on the committee who helped make this a really good code. We got out. Ours went to publisher first. Take that, structural code. And other than that, I'm turning it back over to the chair.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. I do have a comment more than a question. Can this matrix be emailed out in this format? Can we share this?
The piece, we could actually put it on the mechanical code program page. We'd be more than happy to get a link to that on the program page.
This is a great review, and it does do well at giving us the highlights of the changes. And I would like the opportunity to be able to share this with some of our people in the field, some of our labor partners that can therefore disseminate it to their members and more effectively highlight that, hey, yeah, we got a new code and let's pay attention to it, and here's a modified review.
So Chair Hansen, I would second that idea. This would be great, something that we could hand out. And what I like about it is it's not just giving us a code, it's telling us what happened to it.
Yeah.
If you want to find out and it's interesting enough to you or it's something that's going to affect you, go look it up in the code.
Yeah. Yep, sure. That'd be great. If there's any way that it could just be emailed to the members here, that's a real selfish thing because I want it in the form of an email so I don't have to go to the website. and grab it. But I think that would be useful.
We'll email a PDF to all the board members. We'll make sure that it's noted to be on the site. And Chair Hansen, one more thing is that, yes, we do, it wasn't ready at the first code change training that we are doing for the Energy and Structural Code, but we will have, it will be available, and we'll make building officials aware of it as we're going through the rest of the training. We told them it would be available soon on the mechanical program page, but now we'll have it ready to go for them. So thank you, Chair Hansen.
Okay, anything else from anyone? Okay, so it looks like we have no appeals, no unfinished business. We don't have anything on the agenda for new business, and we also don't have any announcements. Does that remain the same since printing? Good to go? Okay, so we move on to adjournment. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
At 10:02.